Hey everybody, so I got a question that I've addressed this a little bit in the past, but it's worth getting into again because there's some topics here I want to talk about and some, certainly people's beliefs evolve and deepen over time. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. So I got an email or a message on my last video from someone called Paprika Parade 8846 says, "Glad you're doing better, thank you. If I may, I'd like to ask you a question. Given that you're an Episcopalian and a devout Christian, have your views on sex work, strippers, porn, etc. changed? I used to go to strip clubs, but I'm trying to stop that and work on being more sociable, and I don't want to do something that will turn away potential partners." Well, to that last point, no matter what you do, you are always doing something that's going to turn away potential partners. Anyone that cannot, I don't know if you're a man or a woman, but any person that gets involved with you to a certain extent is going to have to be able to accept that you are a flawed human being like all of us, and have to be able to appreciate the difference between lifestyle interests that they do not enjoy, they do not share, and genuinely toxic behavior. And that gives me a good stepping off point because, as far as my views on sex work, strippers, porn, etc., well, there are two questions there. I know you want a religious, spiritual answer, but one thing to clarify is that even if I was staunchly opposed to all of those things, there would still be larger questions about the secular concerns regarding freedom, basic human freedoms and rights and that sort of thing. That would transcend any impetus I would have to kind of force my spiritual beliefs on people. So I do still believe in a libertarian live and let live kind of attitude in that regard. So getting down to it, stripping all of the things you described, sex work, strippers, porn, etc., all of that plays into our lust. And so want to think a little bit about that and try to find a moderated, more liberal perspective on the matter that still constrains the practitioner from overindulgence and self-destructive behavior, while also not going going too far in the opposite direction and becoming masochistic and self-denial and that sort of thing. So here is the best way. Everything that we talk about with regards to sexuality in the Bible, the overwhelming majority of it comes from the Old Testament. I don't think as Christians we are required to uphold the religious laws, the edicts of the religious edifice that was put in place for ancient Old Testament Jews and that sort of thing. I do think that Jesus brought us something new, brought us a new covenant. Now, I'm going to read from a very important passage in just a moment and talk about it. And in the light of that, we can kind of start to see how Jesus wants us to look at things differently. Because Jesus is wanting, as he always emphasizes, the most important of all the virtues is love. And that we are called to love, and we're called to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And so with that in mind, we can kind of start to see a path forwards towards a more healthy, balanced concept with regards to things like sex work and strippers and stuff like that. So the thing is, structuring my thoughts, bringing it around to Episcopalianism, though, is very important because the origin of the Christian church came about because King Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church because they would not grant him a divorce. And so he founded his own church, which became the Church of England, the official state religion of the United Kingdom. When the United States broke away from the British and became its own country, the state religion everything that had been an edifice of the state religion of the Church of England was no longer of England. So that church, the Church of England in the United States, had to be reconstituted as a new entity, and that became the Episcopal Church. And so for that reason, the Episcopal Church has always had fairly relaxed, fairly liberal attitudes about things like sexuality, things like sexuality and alcohol consumption and stuff like that, carnal indulgence, if you will. They've always had a relaxed attitude. And so consequently, you will get a lot of people who will will criticize the Episcopal Church by saying, oh, well, you don't take any of it seriously, you've watered it all down. The joke is that Episcopalians are diet Catholic and that sort of thing. You've watered it all down, and you're not taking anything seriously, and you're just using it as a license to give yourself permission to do whatever you want to do. And my response to that first would be, if you have the people who say, oh, well, if it's okay to do that, what's stopping me from doing, what's stopping me from going and killing a bunch of people? What's stopping me from stealing? What's stopping me from this, that, or the other? To them, I would stop a minute and say, okay, why is it that when you are faced with freedom of choice for yourself like that, your mind immediately goes to murdering, raping, pillaging, all of those things? And have them stop and think about that for a minute. And what's interesting is that the atheists will give you a similar argument. They'll say, well, if God will forgive all my sins, if all I have to do is say I'm sorry, and God will say your sins are forgiven, then what's to stop me from murdering, raping, and pillaging and all that? And the answer is that it comes down, it's not just about uttering the words that you're sorry, it's about what's genuinely in your heart, about listening to what's in your heart and evaluating whether or not what's in your heart is bringing you in alignment with God. And that's a lot scarier than I think what a lot of people want to undertake. A lot of people just want rules. They just want to be told what to do and how to do it and never ever have to think about anything. If that is how we ought to live, then we were better off under kings and emperors, but I don't think we were. And I think that Jesus Christ put us on a course towards a morality that is predicated not on adherence to rules, but on an appreciation of love, how to extend love, that love is our highest prerogative, and how to extend it to other people. I'm a fan of Ayn Rand, not as much as I used to be, but I used to be a total Randroid back when I was an atheist, but I do like, so I do still like a lot of her ideas, but one of the interesting things that she talks about is how religions expect you to feel causeless love. That, the love that you ought to feel for every human being. And that's a little bit of a fallacy. There are different types of love. Certainly, you're not going to love the entirety of the human race the same way that you love, your romantic partner or your children or something like that. Those are of unique value to you. Love for humanity as a whole means recognizing and respecting that human life is of value and that sort of thing, willing the good of everyone around you and things like that. So anyway, not to get too much off in the weeds a little bit, but we start to see how there are a lot of people that are looking at the Bible as a sort of rule book rather than looking at it as a means by which we can come to know God. And C.S. Lewis, there's a famous quote from C.S. Lewis that it's God we are to know, not mainly specifically Jesus. By way of Jesus, we are supposed to know God, not the Bible. It's not the Bible that we're worshiping. And that's very important, because what we are getting at, a personal relationship with Jesus, is important because these principles, while universal, are going to apply to your life and manifest in a positive way in your life differently from everybody else's. We don't live the same lives. And so, as that comes around to strippers, sex work, all of that stuff, I want to read to you one of, what is easily one of the most legendary, well-known passages in the Bible. It's in Matthew 5, begins where he's talking the fulfillment of the law. He says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you that until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called last in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." This is such, I'm going to go on from here, but this is such an interestingly worded passage because he talks about coming to fulfill the law of the prophets and the law and the prophets. He comes to fulfill. And I think that's such an interesting statement. He doesn't say he's coming to uphold. He doesn't say he's coming to enforce. He says he's coming to fulfill. And fundamentally, I think that Jesus comes to us as an important, a critical step forward in human evolution and sociological evolution, that sort of thing. That's why people think it sounds kind of wacky, but C.S. Lewis alluded to this even in suggesting that Christians represent a forward step in human evolution. Well, there's some degree of truth to that in a way, because on a philosophical level, not a literal biological level, because Jesus comes to us with the crucial philosophy that we are to be guided by love, that the laws will be fulfilled, the law and the prophets will be fulfilled when our guiding principle is love for one another. All of the raining fire and brimstone down on the Israelites, trying to get them to straighten up and fly right in the Old Testament, does not work. Just imposing rules on people by way of might makes right is not a recipe for human flourishing. You don't get the best out of people when you do that. And so he is here to fulfill the laws of the prophets. But the thing is, even within what he's about to say next, he starts contradicting the literal word of the preceding values. He starts contradicting and changing contradicting the literal interpretation of these words. So there is meant to be, while we are still meant to live by these principles, there is a fundamental shift in how we interpret and how we apply that living. It goes from following a strict set of rules, which can only be fallible, because rules cannot perfectly encompass every possible situation and every possible outcome. That's structurally impossible. So we have to think about how we're applying these ideas. And our principal guiding point is love and all of that. So here's what he says about murder. "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder anyone who murders, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,' is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled with them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid every last penny. Now, this is where we're about to get into the matters about adultery and that sort of thing. This is where we have to stop and ask ourselves reasonably, is Jesus speaking literally or metaphorically when he says that thing about making sure, settle matters with your adversary while you're on the way to court? Like, is he literally saying that we're all going to go to hell? We're all defying God's will if we don't come to a settlement, we don't finalize settlement negotiations in small claims court before we get to the actual courthouse? I mean, is he actually saying this? No, I don't think so. I think that sounds wholly ridiculous, and you don't see any Christians that I'm aware of stressing that we have to, if there's a dispute about your car insurance covering my claim, we have to get it worked out while we're literally on the path to court before we get in the building. And furthermore, I don't even think it literally means that we have to we have to settle the we're not allowed to settle the matter in court at all. I don't think that's what that is trying to get across at all. There are some context clues that, what he's really saying there is don't carry these problems to the point that they ruin you, that they destroy you, that they tear you apart. Resolve I think we can reasonably say that the point of this passage is saying, resolve these conflicts before you get to the point of murder, if possible, before you get to the point of even civil litigation and that sort of thing. And so that's very important in understanding what Jesus is trying to get across to us there. Let's, from there, continue. Now it gets to the matter of adultery. And this is very important because this is where we get to how we think about adultery and that sort of thing within the concept of Christianity. I don't think, again, that we are called to uphold Old Testament concepts of anything in the literal context of these being the rules we must abide by. I think we are called to use this as a form and a means to grow as people. So he says concerning adultery, he says, this is the New International Version I'm reading from, by the way. He says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole of your body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go to hell. Then on the subject of divorce, he says, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Okay. Christian churches, even the most contemporary Christian churches, even the most conservative, I would say for the most part, even the most conservative of Christian churches, are chock full of people who have gotten divorced and remarried. And so there, when we talk about this, is a very, very big stumbling block, and this is why I wanted to get into it, because this whole thing about anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. This is a rather important thing to consider, because you have to remember the Episcopal Church cut itself off from the Catholic tradition centuries ago for very good reason. And a great example of that, there's a YouTuber, a Catholic YouTuber. It's not Pints with Aquinas, but it's someone else similar who, abstinence is his whole thing, his whole big shtick and everything. And he says, in commenting on this, he actually says that what you should do when you look upon a woman with lust, what you should do is say, or when you see an attractive woman, When you see a beautiful woman, a woman you're sexually attracted to, you should stop and pray to God and say something. It was something like, Lord, thank you for the beauty of this woman. Please guide me to appreciate female beauty in the context of a Christian marriage. Okay. This is one of the reasons that it's pertinent to kind of relax ourselves from the nonsense. Don't get me wrong, there's great Catholic commentators out there, great Catholic thinkers. Somebody noticed recently my band's last album, Heretics and Orthodoxy. The band is Axis of Empires, by the way. My band's last album, Heretics and Orthodoxy, was the title was inspired by two books by G.K. Chesterton, who was a Catholic writer and Catholic philosopher. Absolutely, there's great stuff there. But there are also things that need to be broken away from in the Catholic Church. And part of it is this overwhelming masochism. And what that guy is doing there is absurd. If you cannot see a woman who you are sexually attracted to and continue to conduct yourself appropriately and go about your daily affairs without praying for God every single time you have praying to God every single time you have a sexual thought, your problem is not spiritual. Your problem is psychological. You may have a problem with obsessive thinking, with problems with unwanted thoughts. But this thing, so we have to think, and then going into the thing about divorce. Now let's put that in its most literal context, that if you've gotten divorced, you can't get married again because if you've been divorced, you can't get married again because you're committing adultery. Stop and think for a minute. Okay. Again, using the aforementioned Ayn Rand, she famously said that contradictions cannot exist if you arrive at a contradiction, check your premises, and you'll find that one of them is wrong. So we have to ask ourselves, does Jesus Christ, the person who is being presented here in this philosophical context, is being presented, and this literal context, is being presented as the most moral, kind, compassionate, and loving person that has ever lived, and that we are to come to know a transcendent level of love for all of humanity and for ourselves that can only be found by reaching God through the conduit that is Jesus Christ? Do you think that person is so cold-hearted, so bastardly, so unfair, fundamentally unfair in his beliefs, that a 5-year-old could understand how wrong that is? No, of course not. Of course not. And this is why it's so critical that loving our neighbor as we love ourselves is a tandem balancing statement. We are to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. There's a famous documentary, underground famous documentary called Satanist, that is about the early Anton LaVey and the early Church of Satan. And you listen to him stand there pontificating, acting like he knows what he's talking about and everything. And he tries to make this very intelligent sounding observation, which, by the way, it's funny if you listen to Nicholas Schreck in interviews, he's talked about how he's aware of the reality of how that Satanist documentary was put together, and it's supposed to come off as this big, profound foray into the inner workings of the Church of Satan. He said, like, none of what they portrayed in that documentary was like some kind of actual doctrinal practice or anything like that. It was all the rituals you see, all the things that are philosophy stuff that was said. It was literally all being made up on the spot. It was literally like, okay, guys, there's a documentary film crew that's heard about us and they're coming over with cameras. What do we do? What can we put together? What can we cut together and everything? And so anyway, it's not as impressive as it's meant to sound like, meant to seem. And most of the stuff that LaVey and Satanists associate with ritual and all that was literally improvised theater from that particular documentary. But anyway, that's why people say, well, gosh, Jordan, as a Christian, are you ashamed of your time as an occultist? It's like, no, it just feels like I used to hang out with a bunch of dorks, you know. I'm sorry to put down any like genuinely nice people that I know from that time in my life, but that is how it feels. But anyway, so getting back on point though, when the we have to assume, oh yeah, what was I saying? Why was I bringing up Anton LaVey? Because in the Satanist documentary, he does this thing where he says, it's supposed to be love your neighbor as you love, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But what does that mean if you're a masochist? And he says it like he's made this great rhetorical point that debunks the whole validity of the idea. But no, that would actually, far from debunking the idea, that actually reinforces the point of the idea, right? If you're a masochist, a genuine masochist, someone that's hurting yourself and committed to hurting yourself, then that's going to be how you love your neighbor too. You have to love yourself and your neighbor. And that's why any Christian doctrine that wants you to live in a mindset of self-condemnation and self-abuse is fundamentally wrong. So this is, we're now almost 30 minutes into this, and I haven't really gotten specifically to strippers and to strippers and porn and all of that. So let's reevaluate. Now, I want to bring what I just said. I'm going to read one more. He goes through eye for an eye and oath swearing and that sort of thing, but I want to go to love for enemies. Matthew 5:43. He says, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those that love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." So, I used to, when I was a kid, I struggled being autistic and very literal minded. I struggled over that passage because if you read the exact wording of it, it's like, well, shit. Jesus is telling you that if someone wants to beat the shit out of you, you have to not only let them, but help them. And so once again, we are forced to provide use the litmus test. Are we actually suggesting that the compassionate, kindest, loving human being on the planet is such a cold-hearted, sadistic bastard that even a 5-year-old would be able to understand intuitively why what's being presented is unacceptable? No, obviously not. No, that can't be the case. So there has to be a point that he's making. These things have to be analogies for something greater. So, with that in mind, I want to return to the concept of in your heart. Commits adultery in his heart. Commits murder in his heart. What's going on there? Well, one of the best things that explanations I've ever heard, it was in, I wish I could point to it directly, but it was in an analysis of, a video analysis I watched of the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. And they talked about, what are the 7 deadly sins? Greed, pride, wrath, sloth, lust, gluttony, and envy. I think I got all of them. Dopey, sleepy, bashful. Anyway, but I think I got all of them. But the point being, why are those deadly sins? What are those, first of all? They are feelings. All of them are feelings. And this is, again, important because Christ wants us to precede what we do with thinking about what's in our heart. This is getting back to that thing of human beings being a step forward. Christians being a step forward to some degree in human evolution. We are moving out of the animal instincts of the base responses, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth attitude and everything, the default, and trying to work on a higher plane, a higher level. And Christ is guiding us to that. And so We are meant to think about what is in our heart. We are meant to say, okay, what's in my heart has the potential to manifest in my life in very, very, very bad ways. That's why he's saying, resolve your conflict before you get to court, because otherwise, think about the court systems he's talking about at the time when this was said. This was not a place with a lot of checks and balances or presumption of innocence. This was a court system where if the judge decides he doesn't like the way you smell, he can have have you dismembered in different ways or tortured. I mean, you are really not doing yourselves any favors by taking your problem before a court like that. If you can resolve it any other way, do it. So what he's saying is, deal with what is in your heart and what your feelings before they create a problem for you in your life. And so, talking about those 7 deadly sins, what's wrong with these feelings? All of these feelings are states, and this is getting back to that video I mentioned. All of these feelings are states of irrationality. If you indulge greed, an irrational feeling, an irrational state of being, what happens? You run through all of your money. You forsake long-term values for superficial immediacy. If you give in to your feelings of wrathfulness, you have the potential to hurt people spiritually, physically, emotionally, psychologically. You have the potential to bring collateral onto yourself. Gluttony, if you indulge the irrational state of gluttony, what can happen? You can do horrible things like overeat and develop, obesity and heart disease and all that. But conversely, you can also find yourself involved in a state of, say, anorexia and eating disorders and purgative eating disorders and things like that. And C.S. Lewis actually talks about that in the Screwtape Letters, that is a form of gluttony as well, because you're being ruled by your hunger one way or the other. And that's important to understand. Self-denial can also be a manifestation of all of those 7 deadly sins hurting you. Peaceful. They all have corresponding virtues. Virtues related to temperance and abstinence and that sort of thing. And it's kind of like the gluttony thing is a great thing. Yeah, you can eat yourself to obesity and make yourself sick, or you can make yourself sick as an anorexic and hurt yourself that way. They're both fundamentally irrational states. Indulgence and abstinence from these things creates an irrational state. So, bringing that around to the subject of lust, which is what's at play when we're talking about strip clubs, porn, etc., like that. And, think about it like this. In all of those irrational states I just described, what are they? They are forms of drunkenness. You are, in a sense, drunk. I mean, what is the moral problem with being drunk fundamentally? I mean, I don't think that just sitting there having had so much alcohol in your system that you're tipsy and feeling no pain, as they say, feeling good, that's not really in and of itself a problem. You're not hurting yourself, you're not hurting anyone. Obviously, you can, drink too much and succumb to alcohol poisoning. But being there in that drunken state by yourself, interacting with no one, you're not really at a great potential to hurt yourself or others. That feeling in and of itself, that experience is not a bad thing one way or the other. The problem with drunkenness is that it puts you in an irrational state. It makes you prone to behaving irrationally. You are not properly in command of yourself, not properly in command of your faculties, and you can end up doing things that you later regret, that later hurt you and hurt others, and very much in the extreme. So, people, C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters asked this question about the consumption of alcohol. if someone is consuming alcohol, are they consuming it because they want to? And Lewis was a serious drinker, by the way. Are they consuming alcohol because they want to celebrate life and celebrate a feeling of positivity and joy and happiness in life, and they want to revel and in the company and merriment of their fellow people and feel good and celebrate with people and that sort of thing? Or are they drinking themselves into a drunken stupor to numb the pain of life? That's when it becomes a problem. The question is not, is drunkenness fundamentally wrong? The question is what is coming out in me in my life as a result of this feeling, as a result of this experience, fundamentally good for me and fundamentally good for everyone around me? That's the real question. That's what we're called to consider. And lustfulness is certainly a form of drunkenness. I mean, my God, think about all of the, think about what a powerful force lustfulness is. If you've had any sexual experience at all, you know what it's like to be completely given over to the physical desire, in the moment of having sexual intercourse and that sort of thing. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. It's also a fundamentally irrational state of being. So, I want to bringing it around to the strip club metaphor, or the strip club question, sorry. I wanted to use that rubric. I'll give you an example of a real life example, and I want you to apply that rubric to it. Many years ago now, sadly, many years ago, I used to be in a band called Incarcerate 9. It was a very extreme metal band. I bring that up though because a few years after we broke up, my former lead singer, or my friend and former lead singer Frank, who I had lost touch with, tragically, his wife was killed in a car accident. He and his wife were both in a car accident. They were killed, or she was killed, and Frank was seriously injured. And the other driver happened to be none other than Mookie Blaylock, the NBA star. He was, if you know of Mookie Blaylock, you know that he's primarily the primary reason he's remembered at all is because the guys in Pearl Jam happened to take a liking to him and his name and wanted to name their band Pearl Jam Mookie Blaylock, but were not able to do it. And that's why the album 10, that's where it got its name, because that was his number. So anyway, Mookie Blaylock was responsible for her death. And after all that happened, he went to jail, lost his license. He'll never drive again. Good, thank God. He copped a plea bargain, went to jail, and did, I believe, 3 years with a fourth year of fourth year of suspended, and then something like, I think it was like another 8 years of probation or something. And by the way, if you think probation is getting off the hook, it's not just you go about your life. You have to, the probate court owns your ass and your balls for as long as that is going on. But anyway, so when that happened, when all of that happened, I and a lot of other people that knew Monica personally were contacted by Sports Illustrated. There was a writer that was doing a story, an article on that event, and he wanted to interview people that knew Monica to get to know what she was like, get a feel for the person. So he called me and interviewed me about that. And we talked a little bit about Mookie Blaylock and who he was. So he was driving on a suspended license, and he was in alcohol withdrawal. He was having a seizure as a result of alcohol withdrawal, was the official reason. Frank told me that he reeked of alcohol at the scene of the accident, so he had probably just been drinking. But officially, they said he was suffering alcohol withdrawal and driving on a suspended license. And so he killed Monica and almost killed Frank. Anyway, so one of the things that the guy told me, the writer told me, was Mookie Blaylock was not a happy individual at all, and that's pretty obvious. I mean, his career, his career with the NBA had been over a long, long, long time ago when this had happened. He's kind of remembered for some things, but he's not like one of those. What was expressed to me is he was not like one of those guys that, everybody remembers fondly and, oh yeah, I remember him, like the teammates and everything. It's not like, oh yeah, I remember him fondly. He was kind of a bench player that had a couple of nice moments. And subsequent to leaving the NBA, he'd been living off of the money he'd made in the NBA. But the guy told me, he said Mookie Blaylock was the kind of guy that that spent a lot of time at strip clubs. And at first I thought he meant like, the guy that goes out to a strip club on a Saturday night having a good time and that kind of thing. And I started to kind of blow it off. But then what he explained to me was, no, Mookie Blaylock was the kind of guy that would be at a strip club on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock and sit there all day. And he'd just be there all day. And he'd just be there drinking all day and wasting money all day and on the girls all day long, just pissing his money away. And he'd be there every day of the week. Like he was just if he had not been Mookie Blaylock, the NBA star, you would think he was just some decrepit loser. And he kind of was a decrepit loser anyway. And I am very, obviously I'm speaking very coldly about Mookie Blaylock because he, harmed my friend and harmed, and also harmed the wife, in so doing harmed the wife of he harmed two of my friends is how I should phrase that, and killed one of them. And so I certainly, I have a lot of animosity. However, that said, he is still a child of God, and he has faced punishment for his actions. So it is important to try to move forward. But the point being, he was not a happy individual. He was not somebody that was enjoying life. And so using that strip club metaphor, bringing it back around to what C.S. Lewis said about drunkenness and a drunken mindset, a drunken state of being and everything, ask yourself the question, if you're going to a strip club, what is it that you're getting out of it? What is it doing for you? Is it hurting you? Is it helping you? What are you benefiting from? These are a lot of the kind of questions, that I think having God in your life, having Jesus in your heart, will kind of compel you to naturally ask yourself. Rather than think about, is it right or wrong to go to a strip club? I would rather ask myself the question, what am I needing when I go to a strip club? Because here's the thing. Do I think that it's possible to indulge going to a strip club responsibly? Yes, sure. But think about it this way. Is it possible to play games on your tablet responsibly? Yes. But you also have to know that those iPhone and tablet games were designed to try to get you hooked and engaged in a way that you'll spend as much money on them as possible. My favorite tablet game is Stormbound. I don't give it a dime. And I'm not going to start. If I've never, and I don't have any compulsion to do so. If I did, I would seriously need to reevaluate whether or not I want to keep playing Stormbound. And the same thing is true with the strip club. Think about something. When you go there, full well what those girls, if you have your wits about you, if you know what this is, what those girls are there to do. They are there to flirt with you and gratify you and satisfy you in sexual ways to get as much money from you as possible, right? Nobody disputes that. In fact, that is why songs like Gold Digger by Kanye West, My Humps by the Black Eyed Peas, Santa Baby, if it's the holiday season, songs like that are usually banned from strip clubs. because they don't want any information going into your brain that's going to make you realize, oh yeah, these women are trying to these women are trying to take you for everything you've got, get as much money out of you as they possibly can, and get you to part with as much of your income as they can while you're in this incredibly lustful state. So they don't want you to think about that. And it's your responsibility to think about that. Now, I can tell you, using the strip club metaphor, the last time I was in I happened to be in a strip club was about a year and actually closer to 2 years now, but about a year and a half ago. And I remember, no, I'm sorry, it's right at about a year. Sorry, I'm very particular about getting my timelines right. It was right at about a year and a half now that I put the timeline together. Anyway, I remember because I was seeing somebody at the time, and I told her that I had gone to a strip club for the evening while I was, out enjoying myself on the town. And she said, "Oh no, that's fine. Just as long as you didn't screw any of the girls, that's fine." So, but anyway, so that was about a year and a half ago. Well, the thing is, I make enough money to more or less support myself, but I don't have massive amounts of money to blow on a strip club, even if I wanted to. Those girls, what those girls, the amounts of money, don't get me wrong, those girls will do some extraordinary things for the right amount of money, but that right amount of money would clean me out very quickly if I gave it to them, And if I started paying them on that level. I've got really important things I need to think about giving my money to. And so, when I ask myself, do I want to go to a strip club, I have that impetus, that desire, I think, okay, what is it I want to get out of that? And there are times when I think it's totally fine and totally acceptable. For example, I went, I've gone to strip clubs like when it's somebody's birthday or something like that, a celebration, or, the usual, like, I don't want to say bachelor party because it was co-ed, but I had a thing, such a thing I went to one time like that. And things like that. There's times and reasons when it works and when it makes sense. It's when it starts to dominate your life in an unhealthy way that you have to think about. And so that's the better thing to think about, rather than beat yourself up with, oh no, oh God, I had a lustful thought, and, praying the right way and everything, and just tying yourself into knots. Realize that you have these fundamental desires, all of those things enumerated in the 7 deadly sins. Those are fundamental desires, and they're fundamental aspects of who we are. They're just irrational aspects of who we are. So, it took me a long time to understand, but all things in moderation really just means all things in rationality. Have a rational grasp on what's going on. And there's all kinds of things that we as human beings are capable of using each other to help provide that accountability. Just like, when a group of friends goes out and somebody's the designated driver. Well, the people that are going to go get shit-faced drunk trust that person to carry that moral responsibility for them. It's things like that. And so, yeah, as far as, like I said, as far as strippers and all of that stuff, all that sexual indulgence goes, my personal feeling about that, my earliest exposure to displays of human sexuality would have been when I was just going into puberty, in like that 11, 12 bracket. We had HBO. And this is way back in the days when, HBO and Cinemax and those things were the only game in town. And, HBO had a program called Real Sex. And I'd seen a couple of nude scenes in movies and everything. But HBO had a program called Real Sex where they would go and explore all of these exotic, kinky, sexual lifestyles that people had and everything. Unusual, fascinating ways that people were having sex. And the thing that occurred to me as I watched that, I mean, it didn't literally occur to me when I was a kid that was reasonably too young to actually be watching that. That was all done very much behind my parents' backs. But anyway, even though, it didn't really occur to me as a kid, but I think the thing I took away from it was that sexuality is a mode of human expression. We as human beings are wired to want to express ourselves and express these feelings and articulate these feelings that we have on a higher level, a higher plane than just the utilitarian functions that they serve. That's what lower animals do. And, sexuality is a mode of expression and expresses ideas. And, rather than live a masochistically chaste life like someone like Pints with Aquinas or a Lila Rose or someone like that might want you to indulge or might want you to live, rather than living a masochistically chaste life, instead proceed from a position of rationality. What are you trying to say about your sexuality? What is your sexuality bringing out in you? What is the indulgence of all of these things doing in your life? And you notice in that is very different. Fundamentally, getting in touch with that question and asking yourself that is very, very different from is very different from giving yourself carte blanche to do whatever the hell you want. I have, without going into specifics because I don't want to embarrass the lady, but when I was 27, I had a brief relationship with a woman who was 29. Sadly, it could not last for very long because she was in the United States on a student visa and had to go back. She was from Europe and she had to go back home. But for a short window of time of a couple of weeks there, we had an amazing, wonderful, passionate, beautiful relationship with each other. We were passionately in love. And, if we were at home, if we were behind closed doors, clothing was gone. I mean, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Clothing was gone. We were constantly making love. And it was beautiful. I have a stronger mental image of what that woman looks like naked than anything she ever looked like with clothes on. It was wild, passionate sex. At the time, she was very much a Christian. She was giving herself over. I mean, she still is a Christian, but she was giving herself over to this thing, this desire, this passion we had between us. She was very much a Christian and I was very much an atheist. And at the time, very stupidly, I thought that, to be with her would have meant would have meant embracing Christianity, moving to Switzerland, where she was from, moving to Switzerland, having children with her and going to church every Sunday. And all of that sounded terrible. Now, hindsight is always 20/20. Now that sounds a lot nicer. It sounds like, hey, you really, that was very much the one that got away right there, or potentially the one that got away. I say potentially because we weren't together long enough to start hating each other and start getting irritated by each other. But anyway, that could have been a very good thing. Anyway, so we talked about it and her, what we were doing while we were catching our breath at one point. But we were talking about it, and I'm not kidding. It was, not to go into too much detail, but it was almost like the intensity with which they do that montage of wild sex in the first Deadpool movie. I mean, we were really into each other. Anyway, we talked about it, and she said, well, I do believe that God intends for, sex to be for married couples and everything. And this, she was happy. She was willing to do it, perfectly willing to do it, thrilled and overjoyed to be doing what we were doing. But she did say fundamentally, this is, this is at odds with my faith. And, and God does not want me doing this. God wants wants this to be between married couples. And And she had to, in her own way, reconcile that with God. Like I said, it was not a conflict. She didn't have a problem being with me in that regard, but she had to set that right with God in her mind. I have never felt the need, of all of the things I have apologized to God for, I have never felt the need to apologize to God for that experience I had with her. Because, I saw my most recent girlfriend that I broke up with last year, actually about a year ago now, exactly a year ago. I was showing her pictures of me with with women I dated in the past, and we were going through our old relationships, showing each other, memorabilia and old pictures and everything like that. And she looked at a picture with me and of me with that woman, and she said, she was just struck. She said, I'm just struck by how happy you look. Like it really, it's just very different how happy you are in that image. Yeah, I was really happy with her. Was what we were doing outside the bounds of strict Judeo-Christian law? Yes. But that joy and that beauty and that happiness and that passion and that fulfillment, that radiant, beautiful moment, as I say this, like as I remember this, as I remember this event, I'm taken back to, like, I can recall her smell, her taste, her the taste of her skin. I can I don't mean to make you uncomfortable if you're watching this, but like I can remember tiny details of what her nipple felt like against my tongue. I can remember the way the way that the desk lamp beside my bed would color her skin when it came on. I mean, all of this. This is just this transcendently beautiful, beautiful moment from my life. I have never felt like I needed to apologize to God for that. I have thanked God for that. I have only ever wanted to thank God for that because it felt like such a blessing, such an extraordinarily transcendental thing, that it became a strong barometer against which all of my subsequent relationships were measured. I've had other sexual relationships with women where I look back and shudder. God, what was I thinking getting involved with her? What was wrong with me? I'm just a fucking idiot. How could I have let that happen? That's the sin. That's what's hurting you. And so if it's dragging you down, if it's making your life miserable and it's making other people around you miserable, that's the question you have to ask yourself. If you're in I actually think personally that something like a strip club has very helpful utilitarian purposes. You think about, read Romeo and Juliet, for example, the Shakespearean play. Read Romeo and Juliet, and you have if you notice at the beginning, Romeo is not thinking about Juliet. He doesn't know who she is yet. He's hung up over another woman. He's hung up over, his feelings are all hung up over this other woman, and this other girl, rather. They're teenagers. This other girl. And then he sees Juliet, and he goes over to her. And what you have to remember is Romeo and Juliet is a meditation on sexual and romantic irrationality. That's what Shakespeare is trying to pursue with that. And so everything, literally, Juliet is a rebound for this other girl he's obsessed with. And there's a thing about that, though, that kind of like you can pull yourself out of the doldrums with that. If you've been, there's a thing that guys will do where it's like there's a thing that guys will do where one of your buddies is heartbroken over a woman. His feelings, he's completely falling apart because of this woman and everything. You take him to a strip club, and take him to a strip club and kind of get him thinking in the mindset of, oh, there's other women out there. I can be attracted to other women. You jog his system. You get him like, I can get out of this doldrums that I'm in. There's other women out there. I am capable of being attracted to other women. This feeling is fleeting and all of that. That I think represents a fundamentally healthy, useful application of what's available at a strip club, that kind of thing. So again, it's more about, rather than just denying yourself all of the indulgences of life because you're irrationally afraid of what you're irrationally afraid of what might happen if you give yourself over to your irrationality. Focus on using your connection with Jesus as a way to meditate on what those irrational urges are guiding you towards, and think about how to really fulfill those needs, rather than mindlessly indulging in something that has the potential to ruin you. That's the reality there. There is, if you indulge in any of those things, there is risk. There's the risk that you will hurt yourself, and will be hurt by others. But that's life. Life is risk. What matters is what mindset, what rationale you have going into it. And that's why there's a little bit more of a hands-off attitude, or why I think people in the Episcopal Church benefit with a little bit more of a hands-off attitude, with a little bit more of a what we call the priesthood of the believer, of you saying, what is your relationship with God and what's that telling you, And when I first came back to Christ, I had a spiritual experience that really is one of those things where it really it's a story for another time, but it really and truly did feel like a spiritual connection to another plane of existence. I really felt like, they talk about like people on DMT, that's not what this was, but people on DMT, feeling like they've entered another dimension. That was really what I felt like with this. And I went and talked to the priest at my church, or a priest at my church, and I said, I've been experiencing this. I feel like there's like a USB cable or firewire cable connecting me directly to this higher power. I really do feel that. And he said, well, start listening to what's coming down, what that higher power is telling you. He didn't tell me, okay, well, here's your rule book to follow. He said, start listening to it. That is a very real and very transformative thing, and it really does fundamentally change who you are in a lot of ways. So, do I have a problem with, someone going to, as an Episcopal Christian, with someone going to a strip club? No. Just like I don't have a problem with somebody going and watching, say, a NASCAR event or a horse race. What I would have a problem with, no disrespect to the strippers, what I would have a problem with is if that person was wasting all of their money gambling on horse racing, rather than using the horse race as an opportunity to have some excitement and fun and entertainment in their lives, and was devoting all of their time to it to the point that they lost out on everything else that was meaningful in life. By the same token, do I think there's anything wrong with enjoying the female form? No. Do I think there's anything wrong with enjoying it purely for the sake of enjoying it? No. We all have to realize, though, when we are putting ourselves in positions that are prone to irrationality. Anyway, I am now, having had this conversation, my brain is now full of images of fully nude women in chokers and high heels, lit by neon purple and blue lights, and I'm going to go personally discharge all of that by making myself some spaghetti. Have a nice night.